Right, Monday morning, you're very welcome along to OTB AM. It's Ger and Owen with you all the way through until 10 this morning. Get involved. You can text the show on 53106. No, you can't. You can WhatsApp us at 0879 180 180, or of course you can leave a comment on the YouTube stream for us. The footballers of Mayo, Meath and Offaly made it one of the most exhilarating Gaelic football weekends maybe this decade, since the year I don't know, as long as we can bloody remember. And the Premier League was back, and there was loads more other stuff happening as well. But we got to start with Mayo, Owen, just before we get on to their joy and how exuberant the performance was, particularly the young legs winning the game for them in the final 40-45 minutes of play. What do the Kerry Mafia feel about things? How do they feel about things right now? What's your temperature?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I think everybody's still in stunned shock that Mayo were the ones who got the bounty. They were the ones who managed to kill the bad guy, and they've managed to get that piece of joy. And I don't know, there's always this weird sort of taking down of Mayo whenever something really good happens to them. And I think there was kind of a similar, there was a certain tone when they won the National League in 2019 that people were like, oh, it's only just a league. And maybe you could kind of start to sense maybe a tone towards Saturday night being like, oh, it's only just a semi-final. But I would not go along with that whatsoever. I think Saturday night was this massive milestone in the journey of this Mayo team, a team who have beaten pretty much all the big teams in the country at this point over the last 5 or 6 years, and this was the final team that they needed to beat in championship football, and they did it in incredible fashion, absolutely incredible fashion. I still can't get my head around it, especially, well, first of all, I thought that Dublin were going to win by 10 points, and I got that prediction totally wrong on Friday.
At half-time, it looked like you were bang on.
I was thinking, wow, okay, this thing really has happened. And it was kind of even as if Dublin were holding back a little bit in the sting that they were delivering. So it just makes what happened over the following 55 minutes bonkers. And I'm not sure if I've seen anything or I've read anything so far that has properly explained what has happened.
I think there's a little bit in James Horan's press conference post-match where he talks about them not pressing collectively in the first half. That explains a little bit, and they got their systems better in the second half. And then you start feeding in the other 15 bits of information that we have about the 80 All-Ireland medals having walked out the door, Dublin standards slipping, a bit of complacency settling in, and then Dublin starting to play as individuals in a way that we haven't seen them. Not traditionally, when the goal chance comes, the pass gets made and another pass gets made and somebody fists it into the open net or walks it in and kicks it in. That wasn't happening. There was Hollywood shots. The type of stuff that we've read in the culture was right there. And, like, make no bones about it, this was as precipitous a collapse from Dublin as we've seen since the chaos years. Like, this is the collapse in the same game, the same stage of the competition against Mayo. David Brady's Lakewood Gale was on last night, and TG Carr, brilliant timing, and he was talking about Kieran McDonald's point to win the game against Pillar's team after the mill at the Hill. Like, this is as dramatic as that. It's just stretched out over the extra time. I think probably because Conor Lane didn't let them kick the ball back out. Because if they kicked the ball back out, somebody from Mayo was winning that ball, and more than likely it was going over, and we would have had that dramatic finale as opposed to the extra time. So I don't know. We're going to talk about Dublin a bit more in a moment. What about Mayo?
Oh, you see, Mayo are in an incredible place at the moment. They completely defied all logic in terms of what we thought it would require to beat Dublin. And it's something we've been speaking about quite a bit on this show. First of all, we thought that you need everything to go right for you if you were going to beat Dublin. That had not happened for Mayo. Second of all, we thought that you would need goals to beat Dublin. That did not happen for Mayo. And third of all, and this is a point that I'll hold my hands up again and said I was beating the drum on for a long time, I thought you needed a big lead to beat Dublin. I thought you needed to lead from the front, be up by 6 points at half-time, and then hold on to dear life as the onslaught comes back the other way. Mayo did not do that. Mayo came from behind themselves to win this game. So they have defied all logic as to how we felt that the Dubs were eventually going to get beaten. So I think that there is a lot about Mayo on Saturday that almost vindicates everything about this team over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
There is so much so many reactions that are based on the result of a game, who the winners are and who the losers are. And I think Mayo got wrongly hammered in so many quarters for being the losers of those great games against Dublin. The only reason they got beaten in those great games down through the years against Dublin was because Dublin were a better team of footballers than Mayo, just a better team, full stop. Well, it was nothing to do with being lily-livered or not having balls or being cowards or anything like that.
An all-time great team with some of the best players that have ever played the game in their peak.
Exactly. But that courage and that sense of adventure was always there with Mayo. I'd never understood this analysis about that not being there for Mayo. That was always there for Mayo. And it was that exact same courage that was there on Saturday night, except this Mayo team is better than those Mayo teams of previous years, and this Dublin team is weaker than those Dublin teams of previous years. That all comes together and you end up in a fully deserving win for Mayo. I accept that I'm saying all this in hindsight because I wasn't sure if that was the case before Saturday. In fact, I was pretty sure that wasn't going to be the case on Saturday. So it is still a shock. I don't want to sit here this morning and point to things and say, oh, we should have known all along, because we did not know all along. You can never be sure until the full-time whistle is blown.
No, but, no Keelan O'Connor, no Oisin Mullen, Aidan O'Shea has one of his worst games in a long period of time and gets taken off. Like, if you'd said that at the end of 15 minutes into this game, this is going to be the scenario, Dublin will be quite far ahead, these three players will not be on the field of play, what's going to happen? You've been like, well, that does not end very well, does it? So I think it's that bit, because this isn't the same Mayo team. Like the poignant shots pre-match of all of the former Mayo players in the crowd, like still in their Mayo gear with their initials on it. You're like, they're so connected, they're so current, they're so part of that setup, but they're actually not. Obviously, they've had the same turnover that the Dubs have had. It's just that their kids are coming with this burst of athleticism and identity in that second half. I think that's, we can tease that out with Anthony Moyes a little bit later on, but I don't know. I think that whatever strength and conditioning templates and whatever athletic templates Mayo have had over the last decade, there's a type, and there's a type in their full back line, a type in their half back line, and a type of midfielder and a type of forward coming through. Now they could do with shooting accuracy going up a couple of percentages, because like watching that first half you were like, oh my god, they're killing themselves with these wides, and not just Aidan O'Shea's mark, but like loads of other really horrific wides, not being able to hit frees from where inter-county players are supposed to be able to hit frees from. You're thinking this is just going to go so badly for them. And that second half performance, but more the performance in the first half of extra time, is like, well, that's the birth of a new team, right?
And it will have brought them on so much, having found that performance, because it did look like it was just nowhere to be found in that first half. And like, I mean, there was so much about that performance in the first half where you're like, were they just waiting for the second half? Did they feel that there would just be a burst and they needed to wait? But that doesn't really make sense.
No.
Because you can't afford...
I'm not buying that.
Nobody wants to go down 6 points against Dublin.
And it could have been way more.
Yeah, it should be curtains against Dublin. And it wasn't. Like, there's... Again, I'm kind of mystified about so many different elements of what actually happened on Saturday, and the only thing you can be sure about is what Mayo brought in passion and energy, and in terms of running in particular in that final quarter. And what you can be sure about is about how poor Dublin were after half time. Shockingly poor.
Yeah, and we'll get into why they were poor with Anthony Moyles a little bit later on. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Here's what's coming up on the show between now and 10 o'clock this morning. We're going to have the performance rankings in just a moment. Anthony Moyles is going to join us at 8:05 for some more in-depth analysis, and we'll put that point about Mayo's transformation to him. Sports pages at 8:30. Interesting weekend, lots of stuff going on. Mark Lawrence is going to join us today. 40, the Premier League is back with an absolute bang right from the get-go on Friday evening, all the way through to Spurs beating Manchester City yesterday. It was an opening weekend to savour for most of neutrals. Nathan Murphy is going to join us at 9 o'clock to gloat. Ashton O'Reilly is going to talk to us about the Meath footballers. One of the biggest calls that anybody's made in this show in a long period of time.
One of the biggest correct calls
was that Mayo, as that Meath were going to reach an All-Ireland football final, overturning a 40-point defeat 6-7 years ago. They've come from that to beat Cork in an All-Ireland semi-final, and they're now through to an All-Ireland final. Bear in mind, Dublin didn't have any senior competition in the Leinster Championship last year, and now it's going to be an All-Leinster women's football final. I it's a phenomenal turnaround, a remarkable recovery from them, and a real template. And they were 7 points down with 3 minutes left to go. So there was proper drama in Croke Park all weekend. Right, it is 7:41. It's time for the performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
Okay, every Monday morning we go through the good, the bad and the grand in our performance rankings, and we're going to focus on the Dublin versus Mayo game on Saturday night exclusively this morning because there are so many different threads about it. As you can imagine, Mayo are going to be reserved for the green and in the red. It is basically the preserve of Dublin this morning, and Dessie Farrell in red here because it has been a bad year for him. It is going to be a situation where questions are going to be asked of him and the entire management team over the next little while, even though there are so many other different facets that we have seen here that have let them down over the course of the last little while. The main thing from Saturday night, obviously, is the fact that Dublin completely conceded the momentum of this game, that they had this game in the palm of their hands and they retreated and retreated and retreated. And it is inexplicable that their ruthlessness died like that, that there was a contentment almost with the score, a lack of an ability to find that killer touch, which has been synonymous with Dublin for so long. It is so confusing as to where that went over the last little while, because if you can do it for 6 consecutive years, there was a sense that there was this infinite ability to go to the well time and time again, and that was just absent at the weekend. Like, if you want to distill this down to one player, you kind of almost feel a little bit sorry for Conor Callaghan. It's kind of like what has happened to this guy, where we're talking about this as him as one of the greatest forwards of all time. Does the system do him a disservice? Has he just had a bad year? These are some of the questions that I would certainly have after watching it at the weekend. And for me, it was a ponderous style of play that we used to refer to as controlled. It just looked totally off the mark on Saturday night.
I mean, the Dublin... The autopsy on what happened in Dublin this year is going to last long into the winter, and there's going to be a huge opportunity for us to see these players in a couple of weeks' time playing for their clubs, to see if they can get back to having the brio and swagger and impact that they've had, or if some of them are just a good bit behind where they were. Like, if you listen to the football pod with Paddy and Andy, they've been talking consistently about the intellectual property and the brain power that has been leaching out of the Dublin setup over the last number of years. When you think about the A versus B games in particular, that was driving standards, and Tommy always makes the point that the Kilkenny hurlers were exactly the same. The hardest game that Kilkenny ever faced, we always heard that, was in those A versus B games, and that's fair enough because the quality of player that they had and the strength and depth. For Dublin, that was even more pronounced in recent years, and then you've seen that disappear. So there was always going to be a huge battle, and maybe winning last year's All-Ireland title was the bit of miraculousness that Dessie Farrell was able to just pull out, but they still have all the advantages of the massive playing population and the easy access to training that most other inter-county teams don't have. So that bit hasn't disappeared for them, and they still have a bunch of players who are, again, some of the greatest players ever to play the game, like James McCarthy, Brian Fenton, Kieran Kilkenny. They're all still in prime, and I don't know, like, maybe their strength and depth over the last couple of years hasn't that new tier of players haven't been bedded in and haven't been given opportunity, because the previous generation were still going to train and still showing up, still really important, and that flips next year, and you know, there's another raft of players who go, and that next new generation have to come in and step up. And are they going to be as good as the players who left? I don't know. Be interesting to see. I didn't think there was much in the second half. There didn't look like there was an attacking philosophy underpinning what Dublin were trying to do when they had the ball. When Mayo pressed, and when Mayo started to hunt in packs and started to be physically aggressive, like, we haven't seen any other teams do that to Dublin. And again, you know, shots fired across the rest of the Leinster teams who come up against them, like, very passive. Kildare very passive against them. Are Kildare sitting watching this going, geez, maybe if we just tried a little bit to be a bit more aggressive? And what are Meath thinking about? Like,
well, at least Meath put up a real effort, it seemed, in that Leinster semi-final, whereas Kildare were, it seemed, happy enough to keep the score down, which is which is kind of terrible to say. But maybe those counties just need to see this and actually need to see what happened on Saturday night, because...
And isn't that the worst part about this? If you're a Dublin fan, supporter, player, selector, manager, it's like, oh, balls. Everybody knows now. There's tape on what you're supposed to do to us, you know, and we can be got at, and our players will respond if things start going against them.
Yeah, like I do think as well that, like, when it came to this first instance where Dublin were going to get beaten, again, this is speaking totally in hindsight, Mayo seemed actually like the perfect team mentality-wise to actually be the first ones over the line, to be the first ones to beat them. I'm not even sure, I've said it many times, I wasn't sure if Kerry actually had the mentality to do it. I think in 2019 in the drawn game they maybe had Dublin where they wanted them and couldn't get over the line. And I definitely think Tyrone didn't have the mentality to beat Dublin. Whereas Mayo, this beautiful stubbornness that they have, it seemed like that was always going to be, in hindsight again, the template that was going to beat Dublin on that level. But there's a couple of really interesting things here. And you speak about the advantage that Dublin have. I think there's been, again, a lot of scoreboard reaction to Saturday night, as if all the advantages that Dublin have suddenly disappeared as a result of them losing a game, which is just not the case. It's going to be one of the really annoying narratives over the next little while. You know, the sarcastic split Mayo in two, or I mean, all Dublin's home games in Croke Park and being at the business end of the year and all that. Those advantages still exist.
Yeah.
Beating a team does not mean that the team that lost don't have the advantages. So that's going to be a frustrating thing. And the other thing that's been a big reaction to the scoreboard, in my opinion, is the discipline of the Dubs and the edge that Dublin bring to proceedings, as if Saturday night was a million miles away from their edge that they've shown in big games in Croke Park in the past, because it wasn't. Let's face it, it absolutely was not. This is the Dublin team that we have become familiar with over the last little while. They've always had that edge. Yes, they come across as really pleasant people in interviews, and they are genuinely good people off the pitch, but on the pitch they are the worst people you want to come up against. They have always crossed the line in every way imaginable and have on many occasions got away with it, and that is what a lot of champions have always done in a multitude of different sports. But let's not pretend that it didn't exist before Saturday night. Yes, they lost the rag, but if they'd won the game, we would have been saying they went over the edge and they went to any length necessary.
Look what they managed to do at the end of normal time. There was going to be a kick out where they were completely under the cosh, and they managed to get the referee to blow the game up about 2.5 or 3 minutes earlier than it should have been, despite the fact that Mayo are pouring forward. This is like a siege at that point. And all Mayo need to do is get the ball back once more, because Dublin have literally passed the ball out over the end line to give them a 45, like, in a way that we have never seen them before. They are out on their feet. They are absolutely wrecked. And rather than like allow the ball to come back into play, they're like, okay, let's just start a mass brawl here, essentially. And like the dark arts of dark arts from a team who got to the point where they were the best of all time by employing them the whole way along. Like that was not a breach of core values or anything. Remember the kick out that David Clark takes when there are 6 Dubs simultaneously wrestling their Mayo counterparts. What year is that? Is that
17?
17. All-Ireland final. Whatever happens, this ball's not getting back into play, right? We're going to cause mayhem and chaos. And that's what happens when a team lives on the edge. It looks really ugly when they lose, and the 3 black cards all come at once, and really there should have been minimum 2, potentially more 3 red cards for various things during the game as well. But that's what that team did. Like, that was one of the characteristics of it. It meant that the opposition always had in their heads, I'm going to be physically sore after this game, and I'm going to be got at during the match. And most teams, before a ball was thrown in, were beaten because of that. Mayo were never, over the years, beaten by that, and actually seemed to relish those physical exchanges. So the notion that I agree with you 100%. That wasn't some disintegration of Dublin. That was who they are. It's just they didn't have the attacking flair at the weekend to carry the day. And I don't think, by the way, that's not a criticism. That I'm speaking jealously about their ability to do that over the years, because the Kilkenny hurlers had exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
They would kill you if you needed to be killed, and you would be like, oh, at least I was killed by greatness. So many teams beaten before that. I think retrospectively now, I'm in my head going, that Tip team that put it up to Kilkenny all those years, what an amazing team that was. And that Mayo team, who were mostly in the stands yesterday, on Saturday, what an amazing team that Mayo team was. Because that Dublin team stands comparison with any sports team we've ever seen. And this young Mayo team knocked them off. It's amazing.
I really do think that Saturday does frank a lot of Mayo form over the last 10 years, to be quite honest with you, and it does definitely cement that Mayo team as one of the best we've seen in modern football, the one before this year obviously, because this year's team very much have another chapter to write. That actually brings us nicely on to the other thing in the red, which is the officiating. So I don't know, I think this would be an even bigger talking point had Dublin won the game. I think it would have been there would have been a massive storm. It's still a massive talking point, I think, because I think it was just a dreadful performance from the officials on Saturday night, and there are multiple different aspects that you can look at. But the one thing that kind of came to mind was what Eamon Fitzmaurice told us on the show years ago in 2018, that GAA needs 2 referees, and that might be one way of doing this. There has been talk of video referees over the past 24 hours, but it does seem that the game had completely got out of the hands of Conor Lane, something that he tried to arrest and try and bring back under control during extra time. But even different moments before then, you can kind of have levels of sympathy for him for decisions that he missed. Obviously, the red card that should have been given to John Small, play should have been stopped, and that was just bizarre, really. And
I hadn't realised it was Pascal who misses the goal chance at the end of that. Like, even if there's a point at the end of that, you know,
it should have been back. If that was Conor O'Callaghan, it's back at the net, and all of a sudden
if he passes, if they do if Dublin are being Dublin. If Pascal's had more game time over the years, I don't know. Instead of actually trying to be the hero in that instance, it gets laid off again, and suddenly Dean Rock is side-footing it in from 2 yards out. I'm not sure, but that is one of those, like, an entire lives and seasons change on that one moment.
And absolutely, and we know from the reaction from Conor Lane's decision making afterwards that there would have been no bringing that goal back. If that was back at the net, that was it. That was the decision. That was final, and that would have been, as I say, that would have sent people haywire over the past couple of days with regards to the refereeing. Kind of comes back to the thing we mentioned at the top. Mayo kind of needed everything to go. We thought that Mayo needed everything to go their way in order to win the game, and that would certainly include the refereeing, that they would maybe need a couple of decisions to go their way. In fact, they were screwed over, and they managed to still win the game, which again just does not make sense whatsoever.
Well, was there an evening up of things? Like, Evan Comerford comes out, and does he foul the ball? I'm not sure. There was a lot of ball fouling going on. Like, Tommy Conroy likes to carry the ball a lot. He's so fast that you're like, wow, look at that Speedy Gonzalez, and then all of a sudden it's like, hang on, was that 10 steps? Did he bounce the ball? I'm not sure. But anyway, we never see steps called except in the final moments of the game when desperately really need this to be a draw here so I can maybe get out of here alive. And it didn't feel like he fouled the ball, and I don't know. I'm not sure about the retaking. I mean, I understand the 16 players in the field, but like, it's 16 Mayo players in the field. Why did Henley take it? Did Henley know, taking the first one, that he was going to get a retake anyway? Because he seemed pretty clear about the retake happening. And if he did, it's genius from him, because it's like, I'm going to get my eye in here, and then, okay, I did that wrong, I need to reorient my stance.
I think Rob Henley is just this ridiculously composed person that he made it look like he knew exactly what was happening when that was being retaken. I've never seen the 16-man rule implemented in such a big game like that before. Tommy was making the point before we came on air that the officials were in his eye line, and maybe that's the officials themselves are like, okay, hold on a minute, we didn't get out of your way there enough. But I would say that if you're taking a free and the officials are in your eye line, you wait for the officials to move and then you take the kick. And I think Mayo got the rub of the green with that decision, to be honest. So maybe it did even itself up, but I think the main one was the red card. Dublin should have been down to 14 men after the small hit, and maybe Conor Lane after that is maybe he's a little bit shook after that as well, and maybe it is an effort to even things up.
Now, here's the thing: he's got loads of umpires. People keep saying that, the umpire calling for, or whoever called for Hawkeye when it was, again, Mayo score, the dander is up, the crowd is in flame, the entire stadium is in fuego, and it's like, oh, we're going to go to Hawkeye for a point that was like effectively over the black spot that the whole country had seen. Like, that's. There were other ones that they didn't go to Hawkeye. You're thinking, was that definitely a point? I'm not sure. Wouldn't mind seeing that, but that one anyway. Do
you want to listen to James Horan?
Yeah, let's go for it. So here's James Horan talking about the Owen McLaughlin hit.
With Conor Lane for a second. You could be seeing clearly miming on the TV saying that's a joke when the Owen McLaughlin hit. we could have been having a very different conversation here at full time.
Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think. I just thought it was I thought it was. Well, I suppose the thing that bothered me the most is, when a player isn't bothered, the way they fall to the ground. They can't really protect themselves because they're either unconscious or they're knocked out or whatever it is. And I just saw the way Owen fell with that hit. So that's what bothered me. The play went on, and Dublin had a goal chance that I think was Cormac Costello could have stuck in the net. So sometimes that ball could have gone in. What happens then? It could be a very different game, absolutely. But my main concern that time was because the game didn't stop. Was Owen okay? That's what really annoyed me. I just thought the game should have been stopped there.
Paul Galvin made the point on Twitter that his reaction helped spark the Mayo comeback. There was certainly, it was a big focus, and the fact that it's on the big screen, I presume the whole team sees it, and the players start to get at it, and there's a coming together. Definitely a key moment in the match, and a key moment, I think. We're hearing that, I think everybody's heard at this point that he's undergoing surgery, so horrific for him. We really wish him the best. What's the suspension for something like that? I don't know, and does it, how much does it matter? The thing is that it's not going to stop somebody doing the same thing again. And the other thing that seems to now be acceptable as a yellow card offence is a straight clothesline, which is definitely a red card offence all the way up to the All-Ireland semi-final. But you hit an All-Ireland final, semi-final, it's you can clothesline somebody, take them out, they can be lying prone on the ground, maybe a little bit dazed and confused. Yellow card.
You're talking about Paddy Small?
Everything's a yellow card. Well, Paddy Small had one, but didn't Diarmuid O'Connor have one as well?
Oh yeah, he did actually. But the Paddy Small thing, I guess, was less clothesline and more kind of box to the head when you look at it in slow motion. And it is interesting. The higher the stakes, the more lenient the officiating sometimes, and the more lenient the CCCC can be with their bans, and we've seen that across both codes.
Yeah, and the absence of the black card for Davy Byrne was a black card. It's he doesn't pull him to the ground. He does pull him to the ground. Your man falls. That's what happens. That. Precisely the whole type. It definitely feels like we need a definition. If you tackle around the head, that it's going to be a health and safety issue, it's going to be a player welfare issue, and so therefore we're going to try and stamp this out, and we're going to make it a red card. We're going to make it a red card offence in senior inter-county Gaelic football all the way down to under 10s and below. But that doesn't seem to be, no one seems to care about that. It's physical game, shoulder to shoulder. It's it wasn't shoulder to shoulder. No. And it's really time that we started respecting the fact that you bang on about the amateur ethos. Oh, you're giving this guy a bad name. It's well, the other guy actually isn't going to be able to go to work. So what do we want here? I think we just want to make sure that everybody goes on the field and feels safe coming off it. Anyway, OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. This is the Gillette Performance Rankings. If you want to get involved in this, we'd love to hear from you. Who should be in red? Who should be in amber? Who should be in green? And we've given away a Gillette starter pack. By the end of the show, we'll announce the winner. And give us your views. The easiest way to do that is on the YouTube stream, or you can always tweet us at Off the Ball.
We're going to move on to amber, and I'm actually putting Dublin's future in amber here, mainly because we're kind of uncertain about what happens next. There is definitely, a Sunday game last night had a lot of montages celebrating the Dublin era.
Apparently they were dead.
There's a lot of...
it was their funeral.
Fall of the empire on kind of that sort of tone regarding a lot of the coverage this morning, Eamon Sweeney comparing it to Napoleon's retreat from Russia and that sort of thing, which makes sense in the immediate context of this season, obviously, but in the wider context of Dublin being dead, I'm not fully convinced. Now, in fairness, I'm the person who said on Friday that Dublin aren't dead in the context of this season, and I expected a massive backlash from them on Saturday, which obviously went completely the opposite way. So I am cautious enough to predict that Dublin will be back next season, but I think there is a chance that we do see the backlash next season and that there will be a sting in the tail for a lot of these players. And with regards to some of their best players, I mean, a lot of them are still very much the right side of 30 and very much in the spine positions of this team. What you would have to factor in here is what will Dublin do to try and manufacture that sting? Will they try and create a Stephen Cluxton last dance next year? I think that would be an interesting off-season development if it does happen, because you got to remember here that we were speaking to James McCarthy on the show a few months ago, and I asked him that is the idea of him getting to the 9 club, surpassing those Kerry legends and being in an exclusive club of the only people who've won 9 All-Irelands in football, does that motivate him? And he's like, I'd be lying if I told you it wasn't in my head or it hasn't been mentioned. So it's definitely something that's been spoken about in the camp. And Cluxon's obviously in the 8 club at the moment. McManaman's in the 8 club, Philly McMahon is as well, and Michael Fitzsimons too. Do they all go to the well one last time? Do they do a sort of Meath in the late 80s and like they went to Sean Boylan's house to persuade him to come back? Do they do that, but they go to Mannion's house and go to McCaffrey's house, and do they try and get the band back together for one last go at this thing next year to try and get them over the line and try and get them back in the Hogan stand? I think there's a chance it happens. Then again, maybe not. Maybe this is the end of the empire, and maybe what comes with that then is more opportunities for your Basquel type players and younger players than that as well. The team who lost the under-21 final a couple of years ago with some really talented players such as Kieran Archer, do they then come into a team with less pressure because there will be more retirements, there will be more opportunity, and there will be less of an expectation for them to win multiple consecutive All-Irelands? And maybe that is the slower generation that we're going to see. Either way, Dublin will be fine. The question is, will they be fine next year and be back to winning All-Irelands, or will it take them a couple of years?
Very interesting to see exactly what happens, and all of a sudden there is uncertainty of outcome because 3 teams will believe that they absolutely deserve to be there, and let's wait and see what Tyrone. I don't know if we're going to see the proper Tyrone this year given the impact that COVID seems to have had on the panel, but certainly they have enough young players coming through that they have forward power that will give them confidence that they could be All-Ireland contenders over the next while. Okay, so Dublin's future is in the amber, in green. James Horan and Gaelic football generally.
Yeah, Gaelic football, obviously, you mentioned there at the top. Corke Park witnessed 3 unbelievable games in the space of 24 hours, from Mayo's comeback to Meath's comeback, and then scenes with Shane Lowry in the stands celebrating an Offaly All-Ireland in between. It was amazing. But even just in the context of Mayo versus Dublin, the first half was dreadful. People were talking about the introduction of a shot clock in the first half and trying to...
Can we just officially cool the jets on changing the rules anymore? The rules are fine. What you need is teams playing well. Mayo played well in the second half, and there was nothing wrong with... Sorry, I mean, obviously the rule around the tackle and the rule around clotheslines need just a little bit of clarification. Maybe we could apply those rules and apply the black card rules. But shot clocks and marks, and no, the game is a really brilliant game. Let's all cool the jets on that and just ask teams to be aggressive and ask teams to try and score and try and play their best football and stop being passive. Mayo super active in the second half, and the game was on fire. So I'm like, we need to stop with this whole shot clock stuff.
And the game, I think, is better as a result of the result going the way it did on Saturday, which may seem harsh to say of a team who've won 6 in a row, but the way they played and the way they kind of sucked the life out of the game wasn't very enjoyable at all. And I think what will happen then is that that'll spark a rethink within Dublin, where they might go back, edge themselves back towards 2013 style Dublin, where they were the ones instigating the craziness. It wasn't Mayo, it was Dublin instigating the craziness in that era. And maybe they'll edge back towards that, and we'll see a better version of Dublin, a more exciting version of Dublin, which might end up them being more successful, being back to being successful again. And I think that's a good thing, but I think we needed the result on Saturday to go the way it did for us to be talking about football in a positive way. I think as well, when you look at the landscape now, and if people, again, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but if people are thinking that the empire is finished for Dublin, then I think that maybe just spells a good immediate future for football, because the identity of the All-Ireland champions is shrouded in a bit more mystery at the start of every year than it would have been previously. Yes, there is a big gap between the elite counties and the rest, but it was one in the rest for the last half a decade. So this looks like a better future. If Mayo win the All-Ireland, then I mean, it does throw everything up into the air for next year, because they will celebrate for the next 70 years, and they should rightfully do so if they manage to win this year's All-Ireland, because they've been trying so bloody hard for it and they've gone through so much pain. But it doesn't matter. Dublin are out, and there will be a new All-Ireland champion. And I think going into next year and for the next couple of years, there will be more uncertainty than we've had in recent times.
Yeah, even if Dublin pull a Kilkenny and win the next 2, then they will have gone through a bit of fire to do so. And I think there's a really good chance that maybe we don't have provincial championships that provide us with All-Ireland semi-finalists next year. Like, there's a really good chance, if we all seize the moment right now, that we might be able to have a meaningful summer of high-quality games where Dublin and Clonus playing Monaghan in a match that has an impact on the ultimate destination of Sam Maguire. How amazing would that be?
Yeah.
It's right there for us. Look at these games. We could have these games every week. Wouldn't it be great if it could be like this all the time? It could be like this all the time. We don't get to decide, but Congress gets to decide. Please, Congress, give us what we need. Yeah. Right, that's football. What about James Horan? What a performance so far. And Jesus, they need an All-Ireland to frank it. But I'm going to take away the leading scorer in championship history. I'm going to just take him away pre-season, and you're going to be like, look, next man up, that's how it is. And we're all going to look at you and go, look, I'm really sorry for your trouble, house private. And then the week of the game, one of the most transcendent young talents in football is gone, sorry. And the whole country knows about it in advance. It just the news is so bad that it leaks out. And then your captain his game disintegrates for you, and you're like, right, what's going to happen now? Tell me, Owen, where does this rank?
Oh, right up there. Jim McGuinness gets lauded rightly for how he masterminded a plan to take down the Dubs in 2014. And I think James Horan deserves similar credit. There was a sense when he came back that he wasn't back just to try and keep Mayo on the straight and narrow. He was coming back to change the fortunes of Mayo, to finally get them over the line. And he came back as a changed man, it seemed. There is a different version to James Horan that we're seeing now. There is, again, easy to say in the aftermath of Saturday night, but it does seem that he came back with a bit more of a winning mentality, or the eyes had narrowed a little bit, and there was a bit more of an edge about this guy, a bit more of a winning mentality about this guy. And there's been enough hallmarks about his team over the last few years to suggest that this is actually going to be the case. Because, I don't know, that Mayo team of last year didn't seem like, even with Cillian O'Connor fully fit, didn't seem like it was guaranteed to make an All-Ireland final. And kind of the same thing this year. They were playing Division 2 football. So they've had to work really hard for this. I think maybe even 2017 and 2016, there was a team there that were maybe expected to go all the way at the start of the season, and they had that expectation. I don't know, there was a little bit of a free hit about the last couple of years for Mayo, and they've delivered on this, and they've managed to get to the business end every single year under James Horan and his return. And, the masterclass can be distilled into one moment on Saturday night, which is taking off Aidan O'Shea, which could have, again, if Mayo lose that game, what would we be saying about that decision now? I don't think we'd be criticising James Horan about that whatsoever, but we would be talking about it as a very sad moment. But in actual fact, it's an inspired moment. That's how we're reflecting on it now this morning, to take off such a totemic figure in your team, and to do what a lot of managers maybe wouldn't do in the past, which was take him out of the team, because James Horan has that confidence. He feels that the chemistry is good enough in the team to be able to take out an important player like O'Shea, who was having a terrible night. He always has a terrible night against Dublin, but what a weapon he is to have now for the All-Ireland final.
Yeah, and there's also a brilliant piece today that Conor McKeown is writing about the RT man of the match, Pádraig O'Hora. Lee Keegan, I think, was the Sky man of the match. O'Hora's post-match interview was an all-time classic, but his story is unbelievable. I knew nothing about his backstory. He's 28. He's obviously celebrating with his kids on the field of play, but he was on that TV show. I don't know if you know this, on the
Hell Week,
Special Forces Ultimate Hell Week, as number 23. Took a couple of years out from the game, went and did jiu-jitsu and karate and MMA, and came back and this is going to be a motley crew of people who get us over the line, and I'm not going to write anybody off at any stage of their lives. I'm still open, even though he's inexperienced and a young player. He's not young, obviously. He's a grown-ass man, as they say in the States, and what a performance he put in at the weekend as well. So 9 minutes past 8, that is it for Monday's Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
Yeah, we've got a packed show still to come. Talking Gaelic football with Anthony Moyes in just a moment, Premier League with Mark Lawrenson, and much more too. We're back after these with reactions from 7-time All-Ireland winner Paddy Andrews in Corke Park.